We lock our doors whenever there's a boneless tide. Once a month, the boneless arrives on the tide. It's a force of nature like quicksand. You can't reason or argue with it. All you can do is barricade your home and stay indoors. Us islanders know when it's coming. We recognize the signs. Now and again, an outsider comes to visit and brushes off the warnings. They think we are all simpletons or in some sort of crazy cult. When I was a kid, maybe 7 or 8, a rich man from the mainland laughed in my mom's face when she told him the boneless was on its way. Mom said half the island warned him to stay inside, but he didn't listen. He even boasted about how he was gonna leave his bedroom window open that night, acting all smug, like he was proving how stupid we were. Now the nurses wipe his ass and spoon feed him 3 times a day. It's hard to get away from the island. As a girl, I dreamed of leaving, of seeing the world. But mom got sick and someone had to take care of her, so I quit school. Next thing I knew, I was grown and married to another islander, a fisherman. Fast forward a few years. Married life didn't turn out quite how I'd envisioned. Unfortunately, mom had a very what will the neighbors think attitude. See, here on the island, fishermen are well thought of. They're like royalty. And it means divorcing one is like a cardinal sin. Mom buys into the whole shtick, of course. It's hardly surprising she was married to a fisherman for 20 years. Unfortunately, it meant anytime I tried to talk with her about my problems, she took my husband's side. Oh, he's out on the boat all day working hard, she'd say. I'm sure he doesn't mean it, he's just stressed. I had the same problem with your father. Things will get better soon. Just wait and see. When I'd turn up on her doorstep with a busted lip or bruised neck, she'd brush it off. Oh, the storms took a turn for the worse. I'm sure it's tough for him out on the waves. I'm sure his mood will pick up when the weather does. Just wait and see. Wait and see. Wait and see. That was her answer to everything. I was sick of waiting and seeing. And I was sick of my husband. And the whole damn island. All I wanted was a fresh start. For years I dreamed of doing something, anything to change my situation. To get out of my rut. Well, tonight, it finally happened. The day started with a passive-aggressive note from my husband. Go down to the market, get some supplies, and tidy the house. It's arriving tonight. I'll be at the docks until sundown. Figures. The fishermen are always the first to know. I remember when I was a kid, Dad would take me out on his boat and point to the rainbow-colored sparkles sitting on the waves. That's how we knew the boneless was due for a visit. At midday, I went down to the high street. The islanders were in an uproar. All the merchants wanted to close up early and get home safe, but the shoppers were desperately trying to secure some last-minute provisions. I wandered from store to store, fighting my way through the crowd, picking up the essentials. At the pharmacy, I asked the cashier for some sleeping pills. Told him they were for my mom, she always has trouble sleeping when the boneless is here. Poor thing. He rang them up. You best rush home and get locked up as soon as possible. It won't be long now. I will. And give your husband my regards. This time of year, there's nothing out at sea but choppy waters and dangerous winds. Lord knows he needs a decent meal and a warm bed at the end of the day. I brushed my hair back, exposing the black eye my husband gave me for talking back last night. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of concern flashed across the pharmacist's face. Then he looked away and started restocking shelves. I resisted the urge to laugh. As if anyone would ever dare speak a word against a fisherman. We said our goodbyes, then I started home. Along the way, as I walked along the coastal path, I stopped to watch the ocean waves. Above the surf, rainbow-colored sparkled, twisted and twirled. I stood there in a trance-like state, contemplating what I was about to do. An elderly man gave me a nudge on the shoulder. I nearly screamed. Best not to hang about, he said. There's not much time left. Get home quickly. Don't dawdle. I sighed. Yes. Yes, thank you. Further inland, police officers wandered along the cobblestone streets, screaming at people to get indoors. 2 of them broke up a gathering of teenagers and shooed them off. I entered my house, made sure it was properly secured, then cleaned it from top to bottom. When everything was ready, I went into the bathroom and practiced my smile. It looked ingenuine, although that was nothing new. I didn't think my husband would notice or care. "Honey, would you like a glass of whiskey?" I said to my reflection. My voice sounded high and peculiar. I cleared my throat. "Honey, why don't you have a glass of whiskey? I heard someone say there'd been some choppy waters lately. I thought you might appreciate a little reward for all your hard work." "Much better." I waited for my husband, glancing at the clock every now and then. He wandered through the door a little after 5 and locked the front door. Without saying a word, he tossed me his gear. I hung it up in the closet while he wandered around the house, checking everything was properly secured. Experience had taught me it was best to wait for him to get settled before saying anything. He sat in the armchair by the fireplace and kicked off his boots. "Tired?" I asked. "Course I'm tired. What's for dinner?" "How's cod sound? With some potatoes and peas?" He held a newspaper in front of his face. "Fine. Just try not to burn it this time." I took the steps down to the cellar and flicked on the light switch. Pressed against the stone wall was the freezer. At the far end of the room were the double doors that opened onto the street, held together by a metal chain and padlock, the key to which hung from a nail in the wall. I lifted some cod out of the freezer and tucked it under my arm. I carried it into the kitchen, got everything ready, and shoved it in the oven. Then I poured my husband a glass of whiskey, ground up 3 sleeping pills, and mixed them with his drink. I brought it into him. He turned the paper downward and raised an eyebrow. "I heard someone down at the market talking about choppy waters. I thought you might appreciate a little reward for all your hard work." He lifted the glass, downed it in one, then snapped his fingers for another. For a while I darted back and forth between the kitchen and the dining room, doting on him. When he finished the second glass, I poured him a third, then a fourth, and a fifth. Once dinner was ready, I set 2 plates and lit a few candles. We didn't talk. We ate. Occasionally his head nodded back and forth. I held my breath each time. Unfortunately, he kept snapping out of it. He'd shake it off, then return to his food. After he finished the main course, I fetched him a piece of strawberry pie, plus one last drink mixed with 2 more pills for good measure. He gulped it down without so much as a thank you. For a few moments, we sat in silence. Sweat beaded down my face. Eventually, he took himself into the sitting room, back to his favorite armchair. The clock above the mantelpiece chimed. It was getting late. The boneless would arrive any minute now. I was cutting it close. Real close. My husband's eyelids fluttered, then his head finally slumped forward. Quietly, I approached the armchair and pulled the newspaper away. Out like a light. Perfect. I grabbed my handbag and coat, then raced to the front door and unlocked it. I didn't have much time. The street reeked of rotten flowers and spoiled flesh. The aroma was so intense it stung my nostrils. I took a deep breath, held it, then walked forward. There came a sickening splat from the end of the street. For a fraction of a second, I looked over and saw it. The boneless. I was too late. The glare blinded me. As I held up my hand to shield my eyes from the light, I had the most wonderful feeling of serenity. A knowledge that everything would be alright. And that I wouldn't have to worry about my husband or the island ever again. Soon it would all be over. My hand trembled. "No," screamed a voice in the back of my head. "It's a trick." I'd taken several steps forward without realizing it. With a deep breath, I turned away. A chill ran down my spine as I became aware of a horrible writhing sound, like bugs crawling over one another. I raced back to the front door and tried to slam it shut but couldn't. Something blocked the frame. A slimy luminous white blob spilled through the gap. I didn't dare directly look at it. Not again. The door creaked open as the blob expanded, filling the space between the door and frame. With my eyes facing forward the entire time, I raced down the hall. From the sitting room, there came a loud thud. I opened the door. My husband was on the floor, a puddle of drool leaking from the corner of his mouth onto the rug. The room lit up as the writhing sound followed me. I bit my bottom lip, clenched my fists. I saw the glow of the boneless reflected in the picture's frames mounted above the fireplace. The stench was so strong it made me dry heave. There was no escape. Soon it would be all over. I had a lifetime of being a vegetable to look forward to. Maybe they'd put my husband and me in the same hospital bed, thinking that's what we'd want. I had a sudden idea. I rushed forward, towards the cellar. My husband stirred. The last thing I saw, before exiting the room, was him shaking his head. He screamed, but not for long. His voice quietened, then became a terrible gurgle. I resisted the urge to look back. I made my way down the steps into the cellar, where I grabbed the key mounted beside the doors. My hands trembled so violently it took 3 attempts to get the key in the padlock. The writhing sound grew louder and louder, until it was with me in the room. I unlocked the padlock, then unwrapped the chain from the handles. For a moment, I felt something warm and pulsating touch the back of my ankles. My whole body shivered. At the last possible second, I pushed open the double doors and climbed onto the street. Then I got up and ran. I ran halfway across the island, towards my mum's house, where I unlocked the front door and pulled it open. I locked it behind me, pressed my back against the wall, and burst into tears. It was over. I was safe. A light came on at the top of the stairs. I wiped away my tears and climbed to my feet. My mom appeared, still wearing her nightgown, and asked what happened. I said I was worried about her and came to check that she was okay. We embraced. She asked about my husband. I told her he was safe and sound back home, that I'd cooked him his favorite meal, and then came over to check on her. She insisted she'd make up the guest room and tried to lead the way. I kept telling her I would do it myself until finally, she relented. I helped her back into bed, then I gave her a kiss on the forehead. "I love you, Mom." She rubbed my cheek. "I love you too." In the kitchen, I helped myself to a bottle of wine and broke down in tears. Again, I kept thinking about what I'd seen and heard. The awful sounds my husband made played in my mind again and again. I kept thinking about what I could have done differently, about whether there was another way, a simpler one that didn't involve anyone getting hurt. I felt a growing knot of guilt in the pit of my stomach. But it's too late to change anything now. Now, all I can do is wait. There's no way I could sleep, not even if I wanted to. At sunrise, the boneless will depart. Then I'll make my way down to the docks and sail my husband's boat to the mainland. I'm finally ready to leave this damn place and never look back. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, I'll be long gone and starting my new life. I can hardly wait. Someone in my house called the police to report hearing something crawling upstairs. I was neither the caller nor the crawler. A couple of nights ago, I was home alone, sitting by my kitchen counter, scrolling down social media posts aimlessly on my laptop. It was another one of my typically boring yet leisurely weekend nights. I live alone, and I'm not into social life, which is definitely why I'm still single in my early 30s. I checked the time, 10 p.m. Time to get ready for bed, when a sudden knock on my front door shocked me so much that I almost spilled my night tea onto my laptop. XXPD, we are here answering an emergency call from this residence. Please open the door. What there, but I didn't make an emergency call. Baffled, I quickly made it to the front door and pulled it open. Good evening, officers. I'm sorry, but you've probably made a mistake. I didn't make an emergency call. I offered an awkward smile while speaking. The two officers outside, on the other hand, did not seem upset by my clarification at all. One of them introduced themselves. "Hello, ma'am. I'm Officer Blythe and this is my partner, Officer Dutchamp." Interestingly, they were wearing their name tags on their uniforms, so I got to see their full names: Raina Blythe and Greg Dutchamp. "We received a call from this address. The female caller claimed to hear the crawling sound of a large animal on the second floor while she was in the living room. Do you live alone, ma'am? Is there another woman in your house?" Officer Blythe went on to ask, his gaze moving away from my face to the stairs between my kitchen and living room leading up to the lit hallway on the second floor. "No, I live alone and I am alone tonight. I really didn't hear anything abnormal, and I certainly didn't make or hear anyone make an emergency call. Are you sure you have the right address?" I was getting more and more confused. "Is your address XXXXXXXX? Yes, but I did not know what to say. They had the right address. My discomfort was turning into slight fear at that moment. "Well, ma'am, looks like we'll have to come in and have a check on things. You might have been entertaining some unwanted guests this whole evening." Officer Blythe said half jokingly, exchanging a look with his partner that almost felt like a silent chuckle. Already disturbed, I did not appreciate their bordering flippant attitude, but then I looked at the wild darkness behind them in front of my forlorn house, and somehow told myself maybe, to have these policemen do a check for me would not be the worst idea. "Relax, ma'am. We are pretty sure it'll turn out to be nothing. Maybe the caller herself offered the wrong address. We'll just take a quick look to confirm everything and move on." Officer Duchamp finally spoke, taking a large step forward, inviting himself inside my doorway, forcing me to step aside. Officer Blythe followed suit naturally. They went straight for the second floor. I turned on all the lights for them. They checked everywhere, even used their flashlights to look under the beds and outside the windows. After finding nothing, they left. From my porch, I watched their figures dissolve into the dark, realizing I did not see a police car. Maybe they had parked somewhere else nearby, but the thing is, I did not go on to hear any engine starting, or see any headlights appearing in the vicinity either. A chilling wind reminded me to go back inside. I returned to my laptop, not knowing what to make of this incident. I was more than just weirded out. I was somehow deeply disturbed. Something was not right here. The content of the alleged emergency call itself was already creepy enough, even without finding anything wrong in my house, not to mention the fact that the police officers themselves were also very out of the norm, suspicious even. First, they did not seem to have a car. Second, they both looked ruffled. I know police work is supposed to be rough and one should always expect an officer in their uniform to come across as a bit worn, but those two almost looked like they had been out there in the element as fugitives in police uniforms for quite a while. So, are they actually non-police pranksters? Middle-aged pranksters? Was this whole incident some elaborate yet harmless prank? I probably need to call the real police to see if they have these two in their department. Running all these thoughts in my head, I half-mentally typed the two officers' names into the search engine. Maybe their names would pop up in a digital roster or something like that from the local police website. Shockingly, their names did pop up together on the very first entry of the search results. It was no police roster though. It was not even related to the police. It was an article, a story, to be more precise, from a blog about occult stuff, urban legends, and unsolved real-life crimes. The article was published 5 years ago, and the title read, "Where did Officer Raina Blythe and Officer Greg Duchamp go after their last mission answering an emergency call regarding a malicious crawling figure on the second floor of a residence in a wooded area?" Two things simultaneously ensued that I immediately got down to reading the story, and that a knot formed in my stomach, not just because this freak incident kept getting more ominous with more content, but also because the address of the residence in a wooded area was exactly the same as mine. Okay, I'm not transcribing the whole article here, I will just give you a synopsis. One night about 9 years ago, 4 years ago from the article's author's perspective, Officer Blythe and Officer Duchamp came to this address to answer an emergency call placed by the female owner of the residence. The caller, named Lori Randall, stated, while watching TV in her living room, she heard the clear sound of something, probably a large animal, crawling in the hallway upstairs. Upon checking, she found blood trails on the stairs leading up to the second floor. Not daring to go upstairs, she called the police for help. The officers arrived at the house and the woman was waiting for them on the porch. She looked like about to go into hysteria, but the police quickly calmed her down. She then told them she was 52, living alone, and had no doubt there was something very malicious and dangerous in her house, and that she dared not go back inside. The officers asked Lori to stay put on the porch, and entered the house by themselves. They got to the stairs and instantly saw a blood trail on them. The trail only reached halfway down the stairs, like something was originally heading downstairs, but changed its mind halfway, and went back up. Guns drawn, the officers then followed the trail onto the second floor, covered the entire hallway, and entered the bathroom at the end. The blood trail made them believe it must have been a predator dragging its bloodied prey around, except that they failed to notice any claw print in or near the trail. Even more unnervingly, they found shapes in the trail that resembled prints of a human hand. After getting inside the bathroom, they quickly noticed the window was left wide open and that the blood trail was heading outside. So maybe the crawler originally accessed the interior through this window and, after having somehow decided not to move downstairs, climbed out through this same window. The officers shone their flashlights out the window and inspected the surface of the outside wall. To their surprise, the blood trail continued neither upward toward the roof nor downward toward the ground. Instead, it went horizontally along the surface of the wall toward the front side of the house. The whole scene was so bizarre and creepy. Neither officer could come up with a plausible explanation on the spot. They decided to head down outside for further inspection. They were expecting to see Lori on the porch when they opened the front door, but there was not a soul outside. The surrounding area was pitch black. Where could she have possibly gone? They called out for her, but the passing wind carried no reply. Speculating she had been taken by whatever predator or entity that was visiting the residence, the officers were on full alarm. However, before they could take any further action, a cold, gooey droplet landed on one of the officers' face, and a few more followed on their faces and shoulders. The officers looked at each other and saw it was blood on their faces and shoulders. They tensed and looked up in unison to the porch ceiling, but whatever they saw ended this story right then and there, and very likely the two officers as well. The article concluded abruptly, probably for theatrics. There was no citing of sources nor any attempt at proving the veracity of the story. Anybody else running into this article would just call it out as another lame urban legend wannabe, but not me. Not with all these matching details, the address, the officers' names, and the content of the call. I was starting to believe there might actually have been some crawling entity in my house, but it was already very late when I finished reading the article and I really wanted to go to bed, so I told myself to calm down and decided I was definitely going to check with the police department and also give my real estate agency a call the next day. After that, I went to bed. Sleep did not come easily, and when it did come, it was disrupted by a sudden burst of frantic shouting outside my house. Oh God, please send help. Oh my God, there is blood, so much blood on the stairs I can't go back inside, please send someone. Now, it was a woman. I jumped out of my bed and bolted across the bedroom floor to the window, not even putting on slippers. I leaned close to the window pane to look down at my porch. I had left the porch light on, but of course, all I could see from up there was only the roof. However, I could still hear the woman's voice, albeit not clearly. Her voice was much lower now. I failed to make out exactly what she was saying, but I thought she was reporting her address. A short while later, everything went dead silent. What the hell? How am I supposed to process this? Adrenaline simmered down, and I started to realize how exhausted I really was. I needed to go back to sleep. Maybe everything that had happened earlier had left such an imprint on my psyche that I was hallucinating the woman's voice. Sleep came once more, yet failed to last, just like before. I woke up in the middle of the night again, this time not due to any noise. 1 minute I was still in a deep slumber and the next I was wide awake, standing on my porch, in pajamas, staring at the stark night, and shivering in the cold wind. What's happening? I don't understand. Did I sleepwalk here? I felt like I was in a lucid dream, or maybe I was. I turned around and found my front door ajar. I immediately pushed it open to go back inside, but was petrified by what welcomed me in the doorway. It was a standing corpse of a middle-aged woman, glassy-eyed, as hen-skinned, with the entire throat removed, shredded and torn away. The mutilation did not stop at her neck, but went all the way down to her groin. She basically had a canal dug out on her front torso, flooding the surrounding areas of her body with blood. Red droplets were dripping down her fingertips and the edges of her clothes. I was just standing there, frozen with fear, gawking at the emotionless face of the corpse. The stillness was finally broken by the corpse coming back to life. Trembling as if in agony, it slowly crouched and then leaned forward into a crawling position. Taking zero notice of its paralyzed observer, it rigidly turned around on all fours and crawled its way deeper into the house. Still a statue by the doorway, I watched the thing going straight to the stairs and ascending into the darkness on the second floor, leaving behind an ungodly trail of blood, like a worming slug from hell leaving behind a trail of crimson mucus. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in my bedroom with the morning sunlight spilling through the window. It was a fine day, but my head was hurting, and I felt anything but well rested. The realization that the woman from the previous night was just a dream, a nightmare, failed to put me at ease by any means. She was probably the house owner featured in the article I had read the night before. Maybe my brain had gotten inspired by the article and conjured up the nightmare. Or maybe the story in the article was real and the woman was actually paying me a visit in my dream as a paranormal entity. If so, I did not know what to make of it. I took a shower, had some breakfast, and called my real estate agency. I already knew my house was 3 years old. It had replaced an older one at the exact same location and had adopted the old one's address. The former owners, a couple, had decided to sell it after having lived there for 2.5 years because they had inherited a mansion somewhere else. I, of course, had been the one that had bought it over from them, very happily. I garnered zero useful info whatsoever from the phone call. The agency told me straight they did not know anything about whoever had owned the previous house nor the previous house itself. They suggested I talk with the local police, which was exactly what I went on to do. I first inquired about the existence of the two officers. To my surprise and horror, the department revealed those two had indeed been part of their team many years before, but refused to further disclose any info regarding how they had left the police force. When I went on to tell them I had received a visit from those two the night before due to an alleged emergency call from my address I had known nothing about, they confirmed the call was non-existent and decided to send someone over to investigate. Shortly afterward, another pair of officers arrived on my porch. They showed me photos of Officer Blythe and Officer Dutchamp. I told them these were indeed the same people I had encountered. They then revealed those two had gone missing 9 years before, while answering an emergency call from the house at my address back then, made by the then 52-year-old homeowner Lori Randall about mysterious crawling sounds. When I asked about Lori, they reluctantly added Lori had gone missing too, presumably on the same night. They then took my statement and left me their contact info before taking off. After seeing them off, I finally let the severity of the situation sink in. Those two officers were real people, or at least they had been 9 years before, which meant whoever had paid me a visit the previous night had not been pranksters. Or maybe Raina and Greg were indeed playing a prank on me. For they disappeared from the police, just to play cops as former cops on innocent citizens. In addition, the owner of the old house Lori was, or had been, a real person as well, a real missing person just like the other two. I had forgotten to ask the officers for her photo, but I did not think I needed it. This whole thing was faked. I got to my laptop and tried to search for local police or news reports on these missing person cases, but my search came up empty. It seemed to me they had covered them up. I did not think it was because the authorities were somehow involved. I assumed it was because they had details on the case that could potentially upset the community. The police had merely revealed to me what they had felt comfortable to let on. Next, I tried to contact that blog from the previous night, but found out it had not updated for 4 years. There was only an email address of the blogger on the contact page and I did not think it would help me reach anybody. Nonetheless, I sent an email to the address, with zero expectation of getting a reply. The day passed by, with my anxiety and fear culminating as the night fell. However, though alarmed, I was still refusing to humor the idea that I was in any real danger. I'm not the superstitious type, and I also told myself I would immediately call the police, should anything even remotely suspicious happen. At 8 p.m., with all the lights on, I was snuggling in my living room armchair, pretending to aimlessly scrolling through all my feeds on various social media platforms, while in reality nervously paying full attention to each and every slight or imaginary thud and creak in the house. When the night hit 10 p.m., my usual shower and bedtime, I stood up, stretched my limbs, and yawned, ready to call it a day. However, underneath all this normalcy, I was fiercely praying to God no crawling bloody woman would pay me a visit in my slumber tonight, nor any creepy former policeman in real life. I shuffled to the bottom of the stairs, and my steps stopped cold. The second floor hallway was pointing over my head like the barrel of a Goonian dark. The hallway lights had been turned off. I did not do that. I had deliberately turned on all the lights in my house because I was scared. Frozen with thrumming premonitions in my head, I hesitated about whether to call the police. Some of my lights were mysteriously turned off. Please send help. Would this make a reasonable emergency call? But I promised myself I would call 911 even at the slightest suspicion of danger. Thankfully, my vacillation came to an end after a short moment. The menacing gun barrel of a hallway finally answered my doubt, emanating a noise I had just learned the previous night in my nightmare. The same noise the gutted woman had made when she had tried to maneuver on all fours. If the sound alone was not enough to completely freak me out, the associated visuals popping up in my head surely got the job done. Covering my mouth with my hand to stifle a scream, I darted for the front door, but remembering what had happened to Laurie and the two officers on the porch, I stopped myself before turning the door knob. I probably should have just risked it, but at that moment, I was cornered by the crawling entity and my own concerns, and was not thinking straight. So instead of leaving the house, I retreated into the living room, kneeling down behind my sofa, which was a pretty useless cover, lifting the phone to my face, and dialed 911. Something big is crawling in my second floor hallway. The dispatcher offered to stay online with me, but I refused. I had to be able to hear and discern what was going on around me. I could not afford to focus on the phone. As long as the police were coming, I should be fine. A sudden creak, probably from the door on the far end of the hallway, added to the consistent crawling. The thing was entering my bathroom. But it's moving away from my side of the house then. But if the article from the previous night served as any reference, the thing was probably moving to the exterior of the house now, so it would be unwise for me to go outside. I then hunched my back and silently sneaked into the kitchen to hide under the large counter. I somehow thought that was a better cover. I had also grabbed a kitchen knife before crawling under. What to do now? Do I just wait here, or is it really that unsafe to leave the house, get in my car, and gas it? Beads of cold perspiration started roaming my skin. I was yet again caught in indecisiveness. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a flurry of strong knocks on the front door and the shouting from a male voice pulled me out of my dithering. Police, open the door. Thank God. The police are finally here. I was relieved. There is hope now. Then I remembered I did not hear any police car approaching, and the next sentence from the knocking officer yanked me back to a worsening reality from my transient moment of hope. He said, "We are Officer Blythe and Officer Dutchamp. Ma'am, you already know us. Please open the door, or else we are gonna have to smash it." Officer Dutchamp chimed in. Both of them sounded playful, even gleeful, like how a chainsaw-wielding serial killer would sound in their game of cat and mouse with the victim. Oh, fk. Oh fk. No. God, please don't let this be real. I was destroyed. I had to bite into my thumb so hard, just to stay quiet, warm tears of desperation welling in my eyes. Loud thuds came from the front door, each one louder than the last. They were ramming the door with their bodies. An explosion of splintering wood erupted in the doorway, with the sound of a human body hitting the ground. Both of them giggled like a pair of teenage boys at a stupid obscene joke, and one of them was getting up from the ground. I was sobbing by trying hard to hold back sobbing, but they seemed to have not taken any notice. "Greg, can you hear that? I think Laurie is still up there in the bathroom. Yeah, that dumbass doesn't know how to open a window without smashing it. Snickers. How about let's go help out? We'll sweep the first floor later. Your call, boss." Then I heard footsteps ascending the stairs. I was not even trying to analyze the situation anymore. What would be the use anyway? The only thing I knew was that they left me alone on the first floor, that Laurie was still inside the house, and that the front door was already shattered, so I would be able to walk through it without it creaking. I hastily tiptoed to the door and dashed for my car. However, once at the car, I remembered my key was still lying on the nightstand in my bedroom. Damn my stupid habit of not having my car key on my person at all times. It would be suicidal to double back and go upstairs. Time was of vital importance. I could not afford to freeze again. So, I steered myself into the woods. That patch of the woods serves as a shortcut to a gas station not too far away. It was dark, but I believed I could make it quite easily. I would only need to spend 10 minutes in the woods, and I would be in the company of other humans again. Once inside, I inevitably slowed down, even though I had my cell phone flashlight on. There was no path in the woods, just untrodden wilderness. I also had to constantly turn back and observe the surroundings to see if anybody was following. I got away a little too easily, or am I just too scared to feel safe again? The 10 minutes walk felt like a 10 years march, and I felt like I was trudging in a dark tunnel, insulated from any hope and warmth. However, with each tunnel comes the light at the end. After a decade, I finally caught a glimpse of the distant gas station lights. My instincts told me to scream, to let my voice, traveling at the speed of sound, reach the haven first, so I could at least get a vicarious taste of security and hope when suddenly a wet drop landed on the tip of my nose. It smelled like decaying blood. More drops followed. Before it dawned on me what was going on, I subconsciously looked up toward the forest canopy. And that is the last thing I remember from yesterday. Right now, I'm lying on a patch of grass deeper in the woods. I may not remember exactly how everything ended yesterday, but I still remember all the pain toward the end. That is not important now though. Now I'm not feeling any pain, nor any comfort either. What I'm feeling, lying here with my throat, my ribcage, and my stomach torn open, is a primordial hunger, a yearning animal inside me, and a presence not far away, the presence of some young people, teenagers, wandering, exploring nearby, probably in search of some harmless juvenile thrill in the darkening woods. The time on my cell phone says it is dusk outside the woods. Their life energy, delicate yet vibrant, is threading through the shrubs and thickets like a school of fish, luring me into action. I have to put down the phone now, for I have to go satiate my hunger. I do wish I could keep updating you guys on my new life, but I'm afraid very soon the animal inside will take over and leave me with but a tiny fragment of my human intelligence, probably right after this first hunt I'm about to embark on. I wonder who will become the next owner of my house, and if the gang you know whom I'm referring to will eventually come looking for me. So you've made it to the end of the video. What a chat. Like and subscribe for more Reddit content. Click the playlist to go further down the rabbit hole, and see you in the next video.